Welcome to the show Brain Rot, What Our Screens Are Doing to Our Minds. Here are your hosts, Dr. Karen Messina and Dr. Harry Gill.
I'm Dr. Karen Messina, and welcome to our podcast, Brain Rot, What Our Screens Are Doing to Our Minds. I am fortunate to have Dr. Harry Gill as my co-host this week and every week. Dr. Gill is a very well-known psychiatrist, and he also has a PhD in neuroscience, which made it possible for us to co-author a book, Disconnected Together, Reclaiming Connection in a Digital World. Today, we're going to talk about when limiting screen time is not enough. People talk about limiting it, only letting your child watch so much every day. And while that is still important, we're going to focus on low quality consumption versus high quality engagement. I know you have a lot of thoughts about that, Dr. Gill. Why don't you get us started on this topic?
It goes to the concept of brain development as a learning organ that really develops through action. Meaning, if I use an analogy to a musculature or musculoskeletal system, if somebody's moving your arm around as a third party, no muscles get developed. So that the need to develop a muscle involves lifting a weight, which is difficult and involves resistance and involves practice. Similar with the brain, if a developing brain, and we're really talking about infants and toddlers that have this golden opportunity to experience the world, are exposed simply to a passive information processing, which is a passive looking at stimuli that come into the brain, no actual learning takes place. Because, as you said in the introduction, the engagement and involvement and back and forth between a parent and a child is an opportunity to grow muscles of the brain, and for the child to begin to make errors and be corrected and learn from a loved object at the pace that the loved object can design according to the needs of the child. So it's a very kind of, to use the term co-regulation, it's a co-regulated process of learning what the world is, learning language, learning how to interact with people. Sitting back and staring at a screen, whether you're 2 or 50, does not promote any kind of actual engagement and learning of a skill.
What is bringing to my mind is what we talked about earlier before we started today, which is the idea of friction and how important friction is in the world. Now, friction is what human beings need in order to grow, develop, and prosper, versus AI, which is frictionless. AI is kind of a yes man, yes woman, yes person. It doesn't argue back with you. It doesn't, there isn't an opportunity for rupture and repair. So it just reminded me of what you were saying. I did want to mention this new study that was just published by the American Academy of Pediatrics. So people have been saying too much screen time is not a good thing, and we know that. But it's also the quality of the screen time that matters. So not too much, but what children are watching, what adults are watching, what older people are watching is vitally important. And I know you have thoughts about the quality, high engagement-based activities versus just watching something hour after hour after hour.
My thoughts on this topic are informed by my fundamental belief, and I say this all the time to clients and friends and everybody, that the only thing we truly have is time, and the only thing we really need is love. And by the premise of time being the only thing that we have, because between birth and death is a finite amount of time, time becomes incredibly precious. And as a very precious commodity, how we allocate that time becomes really important. And as you can see in the media, everybody has demands on our time. They want our time because it's precious, and they want us engaged as much as possible because it's a precious commodity that lead us then to make decisions based on what we've seen. And from that perspective, there's a rather radical position that a lot of my clients, their eyes widen as I say this. Nobody should play computer games of any sort at any time, because it is truly like taking time behind the shed and shooting it in the head. There's no learning that took place. Maybe you were entertained. Maybe you needed to relax for a moment. Maybe you wanted to avoid a difficult thought. Maybe you didn't want to contemplate what to do with your child, with your parent, with your spouse. But all of that still needs to get done. So from the perspective of sitting down and doing even crossword puzzles, and anything that, gambling games, you name it, anything that is entertaining in some ways is time that is wasted. It's a very radical position, I understand, but something to contemplate as the children are staring at a screen, and to make them aware that they're wasting time. Now, I love to talk about my 8.5-year-old because it's sort of my day-to-day example of struggle with allocation of time, and really deliberately teaching him about the value of time. And yes, need for entertainment, but how much time gets spent on entertainment and what is obtained at the end of it is a very interesting process to teach a child that if they're playing Minecraft and they're building these blocks and endless things, that they haven't actually built anything, and they haven't attained any skill that involves motor system and actually building something with actual blocks. And comparing the two and developing a brain that knows, okay, I'm doing this now, but it's actually not valuable. It's like eating candy.
What that reminds me of, actually, right now what came to my mind was my own childhood, growing up in the Florida Keys, at a time when it was really safe to let a child wander and explore. And I would go into areas there were it was probably brush as far as I knew, a few mangrove trees or something, but I thought it was an enchanted forest. And when I would go across my little canal in my little boat, it was so exciting. And it was exploring the world versus sitting in front of a television. So when I think I've heard you say this, and I think it too, when a child says, "I'm bored," and my patients tell me their kids say, "Well, I'm bored. I want to watch TV because I'm bored," or "I want to play XYZ game because I'm on the screen because I'm bored." Well, the answer is that's a good thing. Now you can find something really fun to do, like go outside, play play with a neighbor, play even by yourself. This particular child I'm thinking of is into soccer. Go kick the ball. I'll go with you. So activity is
Or
really,
let's talk. Yeah, if a child is bored, let's talk.
yeah.
What are your thoughts? How did your school day go? Or why do you think you're bored? And how do you feel when you're bored? The boredom is amazing. I always say, to my kids when they say I'm bored, it's great. Now you can think.
Yeah.
And eventually they get the sense that this contemplative time that is non-existent anymore um, is really valuable. So from the perspective of time being a valuable commodity, there's so many things that we all need to think about, from leaky faucet and how to repair it, to a marriage that's not functioning really well, to a child whose development we're worried about. If we spend any time playing a computer game, we're not thinking those thoughts. And therefore, we have a pandemic of people that can't fall asleep, stay asleep, and quality of sleep is bad, because that's the time when brain is trying to negotiate all of these things that we didn't think about when we had the opportunity. The marvel of sitting on a train, and again, I'm getting old, so sitting on a train and just contemplating life is completely lost. You go on a New York subway and everybody's playing a game or reading something, or everybody pulls out a screen. Very few people sit there and just think. And I think as we were preparing for this podcast, you brought a radical position, which is, I think, very valuable thought. It's not about limiting screens; it's about eliminating screens altogether.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that a new study came out this week by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and there were 300 children in a study, and they talked about the effects of low quality screen time and the aspects of development that are really affected. One being, and I guess this might be common sense, but physical development is really affected when kids are just in front of screens, whether they're not outside running, jumping, playing. Their motor skills are affected in a major way. I know you talk about the patterns of sleep and how important that is. You want to say a little bit about that?
I mean, the entire structure of the day is getting really damaged by misallocation of time. Yeah, I treat kids from 12 to young adults. I also treat adults all the way until death. I would say, people ask me, what do you do? I said, take care of people from 12 till death. And the pandemic of kids that have executive functioning issues is the pandemic of forgotten mornings, forgotten evenings, the routines of life, that the cycles. Our body, from biological perspective, is responding to internal clock of cortisol levels and testosterone levels and melatonin levels and estrogen levels, and they're called circadian rhythms that are connected to the light, the sundowns and sunups. And yeah, we wrecked it many years ago when we invented the light bulb, but now we have really destroyed it by having opportunity to binge on TV series, and it just goes on and on and on. Or we play a game, or we are gaming with friends that may be across the time zones, and we need to play with them. But these are real examples. We need to play with them at 3 a.m. because they're in Australia, but we're really good friends. And all of that is great, but it's also very, very destructive. Not great, it's entertaining,
Yeah.
but it's very destructive. And executive functioning really involves training of the brain to routine of waking up in the morning and not grabbing the phone. Yeah, some of this stuff is in our book if people want to take a look at it. Don't use your phone as an alarm clock. Get an alarm clock.
Right.
Wake up to the world, not to your world, not to the entire world. So the first thing that most people, adults included, do is, let me grab my phone and check the messages. And then, as I tell my kids, and they always laugh when I'm in treatment, and then 3 hours later, you realize you're still in bed. So we talk about very simple things. Just wake up, take a shower, have your coffee, have breakfast. And then if you want to, check your phone. Because now you're awake, you're not going to get lost in that space and time continuum that was designed to keep you occupied. And as well as we talk about it a lot, the awareness of time, the awareness of what 5 minutes means, what 15-minute means. All of that starts with a toddler, and giving them a screen, because it is easier, I will say, definitely, as a human being, the easiest thing in the world is to give kid a screen and say, go away, I'll do my thing, you do your thing. But our responsibility is to teach them things.
Yeah, I think part of this developed or increased, of course, during COVID when parents were working at home and they had to do something. So they stuck their children, their babies, in front of a screen, but it didn't stop after COVID. It continued, and that's part of the problem. Let me just run through some of the other things that this study found. That just social and emotional development is really affected in a major way. Children don't learn to establish healthy relationships if they're just in front of a television all the time. And I guess that's kind of obvious, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Another thing that's affected is a child's visual health. If they're just staring at screens all the time, they get eye strain, dry eyes, headaches, blurred vision. So that's another reason why it's important not to just stare at, well, your phone, iPad, or television for that matter. Language development is also affected, and I know you have some thoughts about that.
I want to go back to um, the development, the social emotional development, and your concept of friction because it's very important. Um, Looking at a screen is observing other people engaging in a way that is pre-designed, pre-packaged. So there is very little self-involvement. And as I observe generations, before the phone, with new phone, grew up with a phone, I increasingly see kids that are incapable of understanding conflict, tolerating conflict, and resolving conflict. The world is full of friction. We talk about resilience as an important skill in life, and increasingly the world wants to be frictionless, where if we're offended, we don't listen to a person, we walk away, we cancel them, we deem them stupid. Like the skill of listening to the other perspective and engaging in a frictioned debate that is actually quite creative and creates new positions is a problem. And I think the screens create an environment in which the social emotional development of kids is really delayed. The magic of the programs that in which I treat kids is very simple. It may not even be about the special sauce of dialectical behavior therapy, but the miracle of putting 8 kids in a room and letting them talk to each other and duke it out and develop friendships and figure out their hatreds and loves and whatever. It's a miracle to observe, and it's very simple.
Yeah. So that's the rupture and repair
Yeah.
dynamic that we were talking about earlier. I would just like to say that one of the other things, maybe the last thing that I'll say about this study that I referred to that came out like maybe the day before yesterday, was that it called for tech companies to be held to the same safety standards that companies who produce toys and also people who produce food for consumption are held to. That it shouldn't just be, whatever happens, happens. Systemic change is really important because what's happening is that there's an atrophy of the mind. And we've been seeing that in uh, various decades of Gen Z and Gen Alpha.
And a specific skill that we also, you and I talk about a lot, the reading skill has deteriorated. Yeah, and the capacity to read is directly related to a function of the brain, of processing the visual stimulation that is a letter, and the letter that is interpreted into a word that is then placed into a sentence. A sentence has meaning. Multiple sentences have a narrative. It's a brain skill, and it cannot be learned by watching movies. It cannot be learned by reading graphic novels. Um, you
Or playing a game, a
That's
video.
right. And it is something um, that is a parental role. We cannot, those few hours in school are not going to develop that particular skill. We had a funny conversation before this podcast. I have an 8.5-year-old who finally, and this was quite an effort to transition from graphic novels to just text, just words, books. And it was hard and it was not popular. And now he loves reading books, but it took time and effort and engagement and rewards and bribe. And eventually now he discovered, oh, okay, this is actually interesting. And what I used, and this may be useful to people, is we talk about brain function, which is when you read a graphic novel, you're seeing images that somebody else thought about. And when you read words, you're developing your internal image generation inside the brain, the capacity to create pictures, to imagine your own version of what you're reading. that is completely lost if you don't read an actual book.
That's one of the problems with AI and image creation. The image created by AI and not in your brain. So it's somebody else's image. Okay, well, I think that will wrap it up for today. We could talk about this topic indefinitely, and we'll continue in the next podcast. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.